our first presentation is titled Digital Distractions and Parental Wellbeing, Examining Phone Use and Childcare During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Ann Meier from the University of Minnesota is presenting. To you, Ann.
Thank you, Amy. And as you can see on the slide, we have a slightly different title here, but the topic is similar. And I just wanted to acknowledge my co-PI on the Minnesota project, Claire Campdush, who couldn't be here, but wished she could. She was here last year in Ann Arbor. And then two other collaborators, Alex Van Bergen, who is here and will have a poster in the session immediately after this, and our graduate research assistant, Emma Goldstein, as well. And I also wanted to just take a moment to thank the coordinating center, who's been especially appreciated during these last 4 months or so as we worried about the vulnerability of our specific project. So Megan and John and Chloe, thank you very much for being with us in that worry. So we're looking here at how parents fared during COVID, which besides the health risks out there in the world, which we heard about in some of the presentations on essential workers. Of course, we all know that the pandemic was a time of social upheaval inside the household too, and that's where many of us spent more time during that period. So a little bit of background on our project then. The pandemic reshaped family life, probably a bit of an understatement. Parents juggled work, housework, and childcare all in the home oftentimes, while spending more time on devices. So here we're talking about devices a little bit more broadly than just phone use, which was in the program. And we know from some past research that device use during childcare while caring for children is associated with lower parental well-being. We also know that different kinds of care are associated with better and less not as good well-being as well. So non-routine childcare activities, these are kind of discretionary activities like playing with children or maybe reading to them, are generally more enjoyable and less stressful for parents, whereas routine tasks like getting dinner on the table or getting children dressed for school are associated with more stress and lower well-being overall. We also know that women do more childcare, particularly the less fun kind, the routine, non-discretionary kind of childcare, and they report more stress in doing that. And then also, childcare is more intensive when children are younger. And so there are some points of variation then that shape well-being while parents are doing childcare: gender, age of child, and type of childcare. And we wanted to look at how device use, which was heightened during COVID, intersected with all of those kind of known kind of risk factors for depreciating well-being. Oops. So our research questions then are, how did minutes in childcare and device use during COVID vary by parent gender, mothers and fathers in this case, age of child, and childcare type? And then, does well-being during childcare differ when using a device or not? And then, do those associations between well-being during childcare activities and device use depend at all on parental gender, age of child, or childcare type? So to do this, we use the National Couples Health and Time Study, and we use the time diary data where respondents reported on what they were doing, a primary and secondary activity, and then who they were with during those activities for every activity during the diary day. Our sample is restricted to those who have a child under the age of 18 living in the home and who reported at least one activity of caring for children during the day. So this leaves us with nearly 700 parents and about 4,600 activities across those parents. We do some descriptive analysis, which you'll see, and then we also do these multi-level, the random intercept models predicting well-being with our key covariates as described before. And I'll get into more details on the methods here. I'm sorry, the measures here. So in terms of childcare, we do differentiate between those routine childcare activities like bathing a child, feeding a child, getting them to bed, those sorts of things, and the non-routine activities like maybe attending an event or playing outside with the child or reading to them. We also have the who with question for each activity. So we also index whether the parent of the child was present while the parent was doing a different primary or secondary activity. So that's included in our analysis as well. And then to assess device use, we look at the question where parents report whether they were on their device as a primary or secondary activity themselves. I was on the internet on my computer, or I was talking on my phone. Those would be potential primary or secondary activities. And then there's also a question, if those are not primary or secondary activities, while you were doing that, were you also on your device? While you were shopping, were you also on a device? And a device here is a smartphone, tablet, laptop, and so on. So it could be any one of those devices. So you can imagine a fair number of people who were able to work from home and were on a device much of the day as they were working, and perhaps as their children were simultaneously on a different device doing school. To assess well-being, we look at stress, happiness, and engagement. And so these come from questions that each range from 0 to 6. How stressed did you feel while in that primary or secondary activity? From not at all, 0, to very. And we have stress, happiness, and as I said, engagement. So how engaged were you in that activity? Okay, just briefly here, the main thing to note about this, so we have time use in minutes for men and women, for different ages of child, for different kinds of activities, routine or non-routine activities. The yellow part of the bar is the part that they were on their device while in that activity, and that in childcare activities. And so there's a lot of difference going on here, but a consistent thing in those numbers at the top of the bar is around 45%, from 42 to 46% of all time in childcare was spent while on a device. And so that's a substantial amount of time during childcare time that was spent on a device. We can come back to some of these in the Q&A if you'd like, but this is looking at some of our outcomes of well-being. So how happy, stressed, or engaged were you? And we have differences for those who were on a device versus those who are not on a device during these are all during childcare activities. So you can see small but significant differences that are more stress associated with being on a device in childcare, less happiness and less engagement. So then we wanted to look at that intersection with gender of parent, kind of type of childcare activity, and also age of child. And the only interaction there that we found significant was age of child. So parents were with youngest children, youngest from 0 to 4 and 5 to 9, were reported significantly lower engagement when using a device during childcare. But among the oldest children, we didn't see that significant difference in their engagement. And we have some hypotheses about that, about maybe they were playing some sort of game with their kids on a device or something like that. And so they were just as engaged with their children as they may have otherwise been. We were pretty interested in the fact that we didn't find gender differences in well-being, because there is a pretty robust literature on mothers having less well-being in childcare and also spending more overall time in childcare. So we thought the addition of a device could further stress mothers in this way. So we've just started to kind of look at how mothers and fathers differ in their time use. So I'm just going to show you, Alex made some tempograms of mother's diary day and father's diary day. And there's a lot going on here. So I'm just going to point to the very top blue part. This is actually purple, but up high. So the blue part is childcare activities. You report doing childcare activities. And so you can see here that moms report about 20% of their time, so 80 to 100% of their waking hours, doing some kind of childcare activity as a primary activity. Fathers are more around 10%. You see they do a little bit more right around the dinner hour, but otherwise they are doing about half as much childcare. So while mothers might not be reporting in the moment more stress in any given childcare kind of activity, if you took all of the increased stress over the course of the moments that they spend with their children, you might see an overall, in a global measure, a higher stress level for moms. Now, this does not take into account device use, so that's something that we'll probably be looking at next. One other quick tempogram here is that question about who parents were with. So this, they don't report necessarily being in a primary or secondary activity, but they were with their child when they were doing other things. And here too, you can see the bright pink at the top. On the left is mothers with children only. So they're not with their child and their spouse, or they're not with their child and a friend. They're only with their children. So moms spend a lot more time only with their children than do fathers. So these are areas that we anticipate exploring a little bit more, but we're trying to kind of unpack, again, our lack of finding of moms like higher level of stress or less happiness in child care while on a device. So in conclusion then, parents spend around 3 hours of childcare time on a device. That's 45% of their daily childcare time. Parents were more stressed and less happy when using a device while doing childcare, regardless of the gender of the parent, the age of the youngest child, or the type of childcare activity. But the association between device use during childcare and engagement did depend on the age of the youngest child, such that parents of very young children to 9 years old, up to 9 years old, were less engaged in childcare activities when they were also on their device. So some next steps, as I said, and started to show you with those tempograms, we're going to dig a little bit more into the gender differences or lack thereof. We also are interested in measuring duration or spells of childcare. Is it just 15 minutes or is it 3 hours? And are we capturing your well-being at the end of that 3 hours, which might be very different than the first 10 minutes you were with the kid? We're interested in assessing the location of activities because surprisingly, as we kind of think everyone is home, although essential workers weren't home, but a lot of people were home during the pandemic, a lot of activities are taking place not at home. And so out in public, at parks, at those sorts of things. And then we can also, there's a question in the NCHAT data about how disruptive was COVID for you. So, sometimes you hear anecdotes, or maybe you felt that yourself at some moments where it gave you some relief or you had some moments of joy. Some people, had more disruption from COVID than others. So we'd like to assess differences by that as well. I think that's all I've got. And to acknowledge, of course, the U01 and the consortium, and also our Minnesota Population Center grant. Thank you.